You are listening to Bring Me the Axe. I'm Brian White, one half of this morbid equation, and I'm joined by my co-host and brother, Dave White. Hey, Dave, how you doing over there?
Thank you for asking. I'm doing pretty good. As you know, I went to the cinema this week. You were there.
Yeah.
Saw that ghost movie right here, right now. It's pretty good.
It's delightful.
Now, I don't go to the picture show very often, a couple times a year maybe. And every single time I do, I am, as is the case whenever I go anywhere, disgusted by the way people behave everywhere. The girls behind us, and teenage girls, now I have very little use for teenagers, but the girls behind us, I don't know if you noticed this.
Well, yes, I did, because they kept kicking my chair and they kept talking throughout the whole fucking thing.
They talked from beginning to end. And I thought to myself, why are you going to go to the movies if all you're going to do is fucking talk the whole time? Now, I'm bringing this up just to, it is a prompt for a message I have for anybody listening. If you go to the movies, shut your fucking mouth and watch the movie. So that's my PSA. That's the kind of week I'm having.
So yeah, you know me, famously a big fan of Ghost. I'd say they're my favorite. Like probably a band I've been fans of bands before, like big deal, big time. Really been. I've never been into a band like I have been into Ghost, and so I went again. I took the kids the next night to see it, and there was a similar situation. Where I'm sitting here in this fucking row, and there's a dude in the row in front of me who has not just his phone out, but his phone on like max brightness. And he's sitting there like taking pictures of the screen and like texting his friends and shit. And I was fucking irate. And so what I did was I reached in to that novelty tin of popcorn in the likeness of Papa Emeritus, and I grabbed a handful of popcorn and I threw it at him and his wife. And you know what it did?
Yeah.
You made him turn his fucking phone off, and it didn't come back out.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, it was awesome.
See, this is why I don't go to the fucking movies. 'Cause people just ruin every goddamn thing every chance they get.
Yeah.
So.
But here's the thing. If people be doing that, just throw popcorn on them.
I mean, we gave them, I think all of us, there was a line of like 9 of us?
Yeah.
Everybody gave them the shut the fuck up look. It just did not seem to register.
Oh, no, it just bounces right off of them.
Yeah.
Motherfuckers. I know. Hey, so we practically grew up in neighborhood video stores, and the steady diet of utter garbage that those shops provided us with continues unabated to this day. And there's no one else I enjoy chopping it up with more about trashy movies than Dave. Just before we get into it, here's a little housekeeping. If you want to keep up with us between episodes, you can also find us on Instagram at Bring Me the Axe Pod. Dave's over there at That Queerwolf. We have a good time, and I think you should follow us if you do the Instagram thing. If you don't, get an Instagram account and follow us.
Do it.
Yeah, we're fun. I'm also on TikTok. For the love of God, if you do that sort of thing.
He's doing dances. He's doing choreographed dances.
I am, in fact, actually, I'm not. Don't listen to him. I'm not dancing. It's just more
hilarious.
More of the same. Me, you see my face, unfortunately. Look us up by name over there. And if you don't know, we have another show called 99 Cent Rental, when we cover all manner of video store madness on the weeks that Bring Me the Axe is off. Our latest episode, covering the Rocky Horror Picture Show, is out now. And we'll be back next week with a look at the slimy, but somehow empowering Angel from 1984.
I don't know if I call it empowering.
We'll see. You can also contact us directly at bringmetheaxepod@gmail.com with any questions, comments, or suggestions. Do let us know if there's a movie that you love or would like to hear us give it the business. And lastly, if you like what you hear, you can subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. We're on YouTube now. Search us by name. Subscribe if you prefer to consume your podcasts that way. And you'd be doing us a favor by leaving us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. So get to it, please. It's fun.
Yes.
It's fun. I guarantee you'll enjoy yourself as you're doing it. And if you listen on YouTube, do us a favor, give the episode a like, and leave a comment, because we do enjoy hearing from you guys. I just want to get that all out of the way right at the top of the show, because, hey, Dave.
Yes?
Who's this over here?
Oh, we have a guest, but not just any guest. He's an artist. He's a podcaster. He is one half of That's Spooky podcast. Hey, it's Tyler Hyde.
Hi.
Hey, Tyler.
Hello. I'm stoked. I'm stoked to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this is gonna be great. We're gonna talk about a favorite of mine, like an all-time favorite of mine, and it's a movie beloved by all. So I'm gonna give everybody a little taste of what's to come. Here's a little taste. Okay. Also, I'm probably gonna talk over this because there is no dialogue in this. There's no narration. So we got people running through the forest, chasing a monster, Frankenstein. Yep. Now we got him tied up to a chair, struggling. And that chair ain't shit, so he's going to get out of that chair no problem. We got the lovely Valerie Hobson, who he's capturing currently. That's her screaming. People going nuts inside of a fancy manor. Ooh, that's the lovely Una O'Connor. Oop. And now we're doing science stuff. Here's yep. Science stuff. Showers of sparks. And now they're going to reveal the monster's bride. What will she look like? You will witness a lifetime of entertainment in 2 hours.
Yeah.
More or less. And there's Frankenstein, the monster. And the name of the movie, Bride of Frankenstein.
Jesus Christ, that is a sonically aggressive
It's really fucking noisy.
trailer.
It's a very noisy trailer, man. And yeah,
Listen.
I went back and I looked up so many trailers for this movie, and I'm like, one of them has got to have a narrator on it, so I don't have to sit here and go, and now the monster's running through the forest, and now people are screaming. And
You did a wonderful job.
Oh, thank you. I try my best.
Yes. I feel like, the sound was still so new at this point in time. They just wanted it to be loud,
Oh yeah, really, real in your face.
Yeah.
It's got a hell of a soundtrack running. That's all Franz Waxman.
Yeah, it
his
is.
actual score for the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Goddamn, that dude could do no wrong. I feel like if in the years to come, like if you were making a movie and you weren't ripping off Bernard Herrmann, you were usually ripping off Franz Waxman.
Right. And then you're doing it correct, You got to rip off the right people.
Right.
Yeah, you don't need anybody else.
Not really. You got the two finest composers in Hollywood at the time. Yeah. Bride of Frankenstein, man, what a fucking movie. This is just a hell of a picture, and it's really wild because this is a movie that it comes 5 years after the original. 4 years.
Yeah.
Right? So 1931. And so this comes out in 1935, and it took years for them to drag this out of James Whale, who just did not want to make this movie. And then he finally relents and fucking knocks it out of the park. Like, this is way better. Like, I love Frankenstein. This movie is way better than Frankenstein.
Way better. Yeah. It's like the Spider-Man 2 effect, you know what I mean? Like, back in the early 2000s. The first one was okay, but the second one's really fucking good.
I know. It's so rare. It's so rare when a sequel is better. Like, this movie's got some holes in it, but like I don't even give a shit. Like, it is visually, it's so nice to look at. It's got a really fucking crazy sense of humor about it, and some just dynamite performances. It's wild.
I got a hot take.
Oh, do you?
I'm not that into this movie.
No shit.
No way.
I was not
surprised.
expecting this.
I was not either, to be honest with you. I have seen this probably 20 or so times, and recently, many times recently, and I was sort of like, I mean, I did not watch it under the best of circumstances. We have been moving for the last 2 weeks and been rushing around, so I didn't have a lot of time for this week.
So you're real grouchy about it.
I was a little bit, and I was like, I know, like, I have a lot of information about James Whale because I really love him as a director, and yet I didn't really get to pull any of it out, and I was just kind of like, this fucking stupid movie, Lanchester, god damn it. But I watched it, and I was just kind of like, there's not much to this story.
It's it kind of covers basically. So the first movie really kind of covers the first half of the book, but like in really broad strokes, and then it kind of ends in a way that kind of makes it hard to make a sequel. But they do it anyways, and so the premise of this one is I'm going to tell you the rest of the story, and they just kind of do it again, where they sort of cover it in the broadest of strokes. But the one thing that I do notice while watching it is that most of the movie, I would say the bulk of the movie is just the monster running away from people. Like a lot of it is just on him going, "Arr, arr," like waving his arm at a crowd of people with like pitchforks and shit.
It's like Homeward Bound, but with a monster, with a partially decomposing Frankencorpse. So
yeah. But this is a movie that comes on the comes on the heels of The Invisible Man, and so you see a lot of what James Whale is doing with that movie sort of carried over into this one, and that is he's not taking it terribly seriously, and it works in spite of that. Like I can't tell if he's doing it kind of out of spite.
No, he was so he did not want to make this movie, not for any particular reason. He was sort of the opinion that, look, I made the first one. I gave it my all. I've wrung this story dry. I've got nothing else to give this. And they were like, please, your name will mean a lot. And he was like, well, I'll tell you what, if you let me do exactly what I want and you do not ever interfere, then I will do it. And because he had made them so much money, they were like, okay, fine. Yeah. And so he had complete creative control. Like they rewrote the script like 5 times or something.
Well, the original scripts that they handed him were like pretty bad. I guess.
Yeah.
Like
one of them involves like a sonic death ray or something.
yeah. But one of the things I read, I sourced a little bit of information from this from an interview I read with Kurt Harrington from the 90s. And a lot of it sort of, what he sort of reports to the interviewer is just like, well, James Whale was kind of, he didn't really hold these movies in contempt, but he didn't really want to be a horror movie guy. He
didn't like horror movies. He didn't think that they were of much value. He didn't like when they got gory. He thought his movies were better than horror movies. And I was like, what a really arrogant thing to say.
I know. He was kind of an arrogant dude, though.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like when you watch this, though, you can kind of get a sense that its aim is not to scare or to frighten or to really create much tension. You even see it just through this character, Minnie. She is so wild, just this like screaming woman who's just like over the top. And it just felt like that is kind of like what this movie really wanted to be. So those moments were just like very prominent. They really stuck out to me, at least, like it was so campy, but I don't even know if it was meant to be. She's my favorite
character in the entire movie because of that sort of camp quality. She is insane.
Yeah,
and she plays the same character in Invisible Man as well. Like exact same character.
Oh, is she in that?
Yeah. It's like he went, okay, Una, remember when we did Invisible Man? And she's like, well, of course. He's like, just do that. But I'm going to give you a lot more screen time. So just keep screaming and laughing and raving like a maniac.
Oh, it's perfect, though. I loved every moment.
Yeah.
It's a shame that she... Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, shall we do some facts here?
Yeah, let's do
it. Let's do them.
All right. So the year is 1935. So here's some other movies that were released that year. These are some other horror movies. Mark of the Vampire came out in 35. That's with Bela Lugosi and Carol Borland. That one's quite good. The Mystery of Edwin Drood also came out, which I've never seen, but that's the one that Claude Rains did instead of this one.
Oh.
Because they initially wanted him to play Praetorius, and he was like, sorry, I'm busy.
That's too bad.
The Raven came out with Boris Karloff that year. A movie called The Mystery of the Ghastly Face came out in 1935.
Love it. Tells you everything you need to know.
It sure does.
Yep. And rounding it out, a movie where the Chinese racism wasn't enough. They had to go Egypt. Charlie Chan in Egypt came out that year.
Oh, no.
And do you know who's playing Charlie Chan in that? It's got to be a white man.
Oh, absolutely. I think it was the same.
I mean, it was always a white man.
I think it was the same actor for most of it. And it was always a white dude with his fucking eyes pinned back with tape. Yeah.
Horrifying.
Motherfuckers. They were making those Charlie Chan movies straight up into the 80s that way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No friggin' way. It took them a long time to learn that lesson then. Holy shit.
So yeah, cast and crew. We got a director, as we were talking. We've already talked about James Whale a good deal. I think he is among one of the greatest filmmakers of all time. Just no question. The Lammleys, they hired him based on his reputation originally for directing dialogue on stage. And this is here at the dawn of the talkies. And he ends up being one of their biggest talents. We cover him in much greater detail and depth in our Old Dark House episode, so listen to that for even more Pride commentary. In short, though, if you've not heard that episode, Whale was like openly gay at a time and in a place where nobody else really seemed to care.
Oh no, a lot of people cared. He made a lot of money for it's sort of like, why was Stephen King so powerful? Because he made people lots of money. If he did not make people lots of money, he would not have been taken seriously. Same is true for James Whale.
Oh, I take this from Harrington's account of him.
And Curtis Harrington's, I'm not going to say he's not a good reporter because he was his friend, but they're both of an era where they weren't closeted. But they did sort of play they played a certain kind of role socially where, James Whale is very buttoned up. He's very serious. He's, very, very professional. If he were a screaming queen, kind of Ernest Thesiger was, and if you were like that, you would get, there was a place that they had for you, and you were kind of a joke. And because, yes, he was openly gay, but he probably didn't talk about it, in mixed company. He would never really play it up. Like a lot of people, one of the things that gets talked about a lot in his biography is that like he would he was an artist first. He was always an artist first. And he was openly gay, yes, but he was an artist first. And it's like, well, we all know that you're both of those things. His homosexuality is going to factor into everything he makes, whether he knows it or not, or whether he wants to admit it or not. But so it was always just sort of like, well, yes, I am, but I'm also a very serious artist, and that's what I want you to know me as. And it was kind of like, okay, so you're openly gay, which again, this is a huge thing for 1930s, but also you are not talking about it unless you're with other gay men. And I'm sure he spent most of his time with other gay men, but so he was openly gay, but not in a way that you would like. It's hard to think of a contemporary example.
Sure. Yeah.
Because there's a lot of like internalized homophobia there.
Yeah, and it's sort of he could get away with not presenting as gay in situations, where he could be perceived as maybe straight acting, and that might have allowed him
British.
to. Well, right, yeah. So already you're a little bit British. You got a little bit of sugar in your pockets. You know what I mean? So they're just like, oh, that's just the European in him,
That's true.
I was to say, one of the things that really kind of kept coming up is really the subject of his sexuality didn't really seem to matter until he came under scrutiny during the HUAC hearings. And then he was, it wasn't just that he was gay, he was a communist as well.
Uh-oh.
So,
yeah. I mean, it ended his career essentially. Like the fact that, so that's why it's hard to be like, well, nobody cared. Well, yes, they did. That is essentially what killed his career. It was just that at this time, he was so bankable that they were willing to overlook it or let it slide. People said tons of like heinous shit behind his back and probably to his face too.
Cast, Boris Karloff, of course. He's a man who needs no introduction, and he is as vital to horror at the time as Bela Lugosi. Portrayed two of the big five Universal monsters, went on to a long and fruitful career in Bees as well as on Broadway. I'm not really
Classy
sure.
as hell.
Yeah. Oh, Jesus Christ, yeah. A pure gentleman. I'm not really sure what it was about him that avoided the same sort of pitfalls that claimed so many of his contemporaries, but he seemed to be perfectly at home pigeonholed as a horror movie guy. Also, he was one of the founding members of the Screen Actors Guild.
He is, I think, the reason why it got founded, because he got so badly hurt a bunch of times, and he was like, this is insane. I cannot keep doing this. They cannot keep forcing me to do this.
Yeah. He gets horribly injured on this movie, as a matter of fact, yeah.
Did he?
There's a scene very early on where there's a couple of people sort of falling into the well after the windmill has fallen over.
Yeah.
And so during this, he slips and it was like a set. So like he falls down into an actual well that they had built, and he ends up dislocating his leg at the hip. And so they drag him out of there. They're like, well, we've still got like 8 hours of shots with you scheduled for today, so we got to get those shots. And so they took like these belts and stuff, and they just trussed up his hip so that he could finish the day out. And then they're like, okay, now
that's
we'll take
wild.
you to the hospital. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a real walk it off scenario.
Yeah, hard to
You're
walk it off with a
fine.
dislocated hip.
Yeah, and so he's and he did it, and like he was just a trooper. But yeah, that sucks, dude.
Yeah, I mean, it probably helped that at that point in the movie, you know, a lot of his lines are just like "arg, arg," so it probably, you know, he could just like groan in pain, and it would just translate as his character, you know.
You just shift a little bit, get a little twinge. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, and then the next day they're like, hey, can you run through the fields now? Can you just run through the forest a couple times?
Yeah,
He's probably like, I fucking hate you.
No. He stood up, kind of like, you know, swung his leg a little bit, and he's like, yeah, I think I got this.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Wouldn't be me.
Fuck no. Oh God, yeah. I know this job at this time, you really gotta want it if you want to be like a movie star, because they're gonna put you through some shit.
Mm-hmm.
So we've also got Elsa Lanchester. Like everybody else in Whale's Orbit, she came from the English stage. She meets Charles Laughton in the 1920s, and the two of them are married a couple of years later, which is interesting considering that Laughton, famously featured in our Old Dark House episode, was gay, like basically everybody else involved in this movie.
All right.
Much, yep.
Yeah.
So she was a beard.
Yeah.
She was kind of a weird lady too. Like she was a very interesting person.
Everything I read about her, like there's nothing to indicate that she was like even a little bit queer in any sort of way. She was just like just a fucking weirdo who hung around with other like weirdos, and like it was just sort of like deeply ingrained in her person. Everything that I read about her, I can't decide if she would be like my shit, like the kind of person I'd want to hang around with, or just somebody I would be immediately annoyed by.
Right. It's a fine line, you know? Yeah. Maybe 1 hour's cool,
think
2 hours might be too much.
Yeah, she seems like she was one of those, like, I mean, she was probably genuinely strange, but like very performative in her weirdness. Like, you know, she would, a snifter of brandy and poured in a man's hat, like that kind of bullshit.
Yeah, apparently on the set of this movie, she kept flashing everybody because she was like nude underneath the bride gown in those end scenes. And so she's just like wandering around, just like flashing people.
Yeah. She was like, half of them are gay anyway, so it's cool.
Yeah, it's all good. Right. So yeah, she acts right up to a few years before she dies. I think she died in the mid '80s. She in her later years, she did a bunch of TV, and she worked for Disney a bunch. Like she's in Mary Poppins and shit like that. So yeah. And closing it out, though, this is a fucking star-studded movie, but just our sort of triumvirate. We got Ernest Thesiger, who is one of my favorite. I love this man to death. Studio, like I said, wanted Claude Rains for the role, but Whale, of course, he has his own people, and luckily they're all contracted with Universal, so he can just like work with whoever he wants to. But in this case,
there's some question about this because I think Whale always sort of maintained that Thesiger was who he wanted all along for this character.
Yeah.
So I don't know if like the studio was like, no, you have to use whoever we say. He was probably like, I'm going to leave. And they were like, fine, God damn it.
What it was Junior Lemley went on vacation to Europe and was just out of pocket. So in that time, he was like, no, it's all good. Ernest Thesiger's the guy. Claude Rains is out. He's doing something else anyways. And so that's how they did it.
Well, he's the right choice because Ernest Thesiger fucking rules in this movie. His performance, he is the best of all of these characters. And there's a lot of outstanding acting in this movie. Oh, yeah. It's really what carries the whole movie.
Yeah, we get Una O'Connor, who we've mentioned already. She's Minnie, the sort of like screeching domestic. Opie Hedgie is the hermit that he hangs, who's also just a dynamite character in this. We got Dwight Fry again, essentially
looking like unrecognizable.
Like he looks nothing like Renfield, or even really like the character. I think Hans or Franz or something like that from the last movie. Fritz is the name of the character. One of those, It sounds like a sausage of some kind.
It's Hans, Franz, or Chad. I don't know his name.
Yeah. Yeah, we're a couple of years past the Old Dark House here. He plays a way different character, but equally as awesome. He has a really, really interesting look that was made to play weirdos in horror movies. Like he's got crazy eyebrows.
Are those his real eyebrows?
I think it's an appliance, though. No, I don't think they are. That's got to be an appliance.
I don't know, man. I mean, then again, Jack Pierce, who did all the makeup and special effects on this, he was kind of known for like hair work, I guess. I mean, apart from like sculpting and making monsters and shit. So maybe. But
yeah, he loves his things were like he liked sculpting and making monsters and also making fake eyebrows.
Fake
it's
eyebrows.
A real niche work.
Fake eyebrows, and
Totally.
he gave, and when he was given like when he could, he'd give a dude a fucking widow's peak every time.
Get into it. It's the Dracula effect.
Yep. So let's see. There were a few taglines for this movie here, and they're fucking great. They're definitely 30s taglines. We've got more fearful than the monster himself, and then we've got warning: the monster demands a mate.
Oh no!
Yep.
Did he really though?
I mean, well, here's the thing: is until a certain point, he doesn't even realize that shit's on the table. Like,
I know.
Praetorius is the one who's like, "Hey, I could make you a lady," and he's like, "You could you?"
Yeah, he's like, okay, I'm into
and then
it.
the censors were like, "Oh no, you can't,"
Right.
Yeah, I
because
actually
they threw
heard.
a fucking fit.
I heard that they were concerned about this movie inspiring necrophilia
Yep.
at the time.
Yeah. So this is
Wild.
the thing: is when we did Old Dark House last year for our Pride, that was an example of like we deliberately chose like a pre-code horror movie to talk about. And this is and like this movie is a post-code horror movie, and it suffers in a lot of ways and it benefits in a lot of ways at the same time also, because the way that the Hays Code worked was like you would they weren't like the MPAA who would watch the movie and then go, okay, you got to change this and this and this. They just look at the script at the time. And they would go, okay, well, you can't say that. You can't portray this. And that's all got to go. And then they would cut it and they'd present script drafts until they got something that passed the code. And so a lot of the shit in this movie that makes it in was like deliberate little tweaks just to get through the censors. And then they would like do all sorts of like weird visual stuff to sort of be like, well, fuck these guys. So yeah, but this movie got...
It's sort of like when Wes Craven made Scream exceedingly violent and then was like, I guess we'll cut this if you insist.
yeah.
Never intending for it to be that violent, but then
Right.
it just by comparison looks so much better once it's cut.
Yeah. And because they were so many of them were such hardcore Christians because that's who they're trying to appeal to. Like that's the whole point of this censorship board is really to appease like Christian groups in various states across the country. And so they're really keyed into certain things and they don't really give a shit about other things.
No, the Hays Code was specifically a direct result from a sort of like Catholic League of Decency or like something to that effect. It was specifically from like a Catholic civics group that were like, you can't do this in these movies. And, the industry was like, fine, I guess we'll acquiesce to you guys.
Well, this movie
Meanwhile,
definitely
they're all
catered
like killing
to that.
each other.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
But there's like those two scenes with the crucifix so prominently placed in this movie. That's probably why they're probably catering to that demographic.
Yeah, there's actually I'll save it for when we get there, but like there is a moment where what is it? Praetorius says to Frankenstein, he's like, follow the lead of nature or of God if you like your Bible stories. And he kind of spits the line Bible stories.
Yeah, he says it with a
out.
sneer.
Because originally the scripted line was, if you like your fairy tales, and the Hays Code was like, how dare you call our faith fairy tales? And they were like, fine, we'll change it to Bible stories. And then he gets on set and he's like, all right, Ernest, really spit this one out.
That's good.
Yeah. There's a thing that I did not notice until I had seen the interview with Rick Baker on this. He points out that and I noticed this upon second viewing. He points out that the monster makeup in this movie evolves as the movie goes on. He said that the guy who did all this, Jack Pierce, who was basically Universal's like monster maker, and he himself,
Yeah, he did everything.
also gigantic fucking weirdo, that guy. But what he did was he designed like several sort of subtle changes to this. So when the movie starts, when we first see Frankenstein's, the monster rather, he emerges from like the well and all of his hair is burned off. And he's got like a burn on his face and he's got a burn on his arm. And the face and the arm burn are going to remain. But as the movie goes on, the hair grows back. And I'm watching this movie, and I'm like, who the fuck would think to do that? But yeah, that's what he did. Crazy fucking detail to throw in there.
That is so subtle, but that's amazing.
Yeah. Honestly, he was kind of an ego, like a real egomaniac, and I'm sure that he was like, "This is brilliant. I am a fucking genius for doing this," and like nobody but Rick Baker noticed it. So yeah.
But like, what is the timeline of this movie? How long? It feels like it's just a few days.
I know. I think what we're supposed to gather is a good deal of time sort of passes from the moment that he meets the hermit to the moment that he's chased out of the cabin.
Okay.
But like, yeah, like James Whale plays real fast and loose with the timeline in this one, so it's kind of tough to say because this movie does fucking move fast.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So this is one of Colin Clive's last movies. He plays Henry Frankenstein, obviously. He dies 2 years after this movie is made. So before he was an actor, he was a military officer for England, but there was a he sustained a leg injury from falling off a horse during that time that cut his sort of military career short, and to sort of like figure out what else is new, he turns to acting. And then the injury at the time was pretty minor, but it did sort of like get worse over time. But this thing sort of haunted him in a really sort of like bigger way than it should have. Like he was really anxious about it. And the fact that like he had sort of gained a bit of acclaim as an actor, he was dogged by this injury, which, you know, he kind of resulted in a limp every now and then. And so to kind of deal with it, he begins drinking.
And having sex with men.
That's true as well.
I don't know if it was to deal with it or not, but
Yeah.
you know.
It's a little balm for the soul.
Yeah. Oh, you see, sir, you must. My leg, it hurts. Yeah. But anyways, this injury kind of like it has this sort of larger than life role in his life that draws, and his alcoholism gets worse and worse. And by the time he makes this movie, he is like blind drunk all the fucking time. And in such a way that they really probably should have cut him loose. But James Whale was like, no, he looks crazy, and that's going to be
I think I
awesome
can work
this
with
movie.
this.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
James Whale wasn't such a great guy, unfortunately.
It doesn't sound like it, because they kind of came up at the same time, right? Like his debut film was Clive's debut film as well, like as actor and director.
Yeah.
I think
so.
I think so.
But yeah, so anyways, he a couple of years after this, he's just like wasted all the time, and he fucking dies due to complications from tuberculosis, which just sucks.
Wow. That's brutal.
Yeah. What I found a really crazy fucking detail about this as I was researching this. Apparently, back then, when a person died, you could just go to the city morgue. You are like a regular person and just look at the bodies.
Yep.
And so when like a celebrity would die, it was almost like they would be lying in state at the city morgue, and fucking people would go and see him. And Forrest Ackerman actually reported that he was one of the hundreds of people that went to the morgue to see fucking Colin Clive's dead body there.
It's like going to the zoo.
Yeah,
But
it's just
way worse.
fucking crazy. I don't know if it was like that everywhere or just like Los Angeles, but that definitely feels very Hollywood Babylon to me.
Yeah,
I doubt people would do that a lot. I'm like, obviously with famous people, they probably would, but it used to happen with like criminal cases that were pretty notorious and like unsolved. People would be like, they would go and look at the bodies. And I think that's why they don't do it anymore, because it was like, it became so procedurally problematic.
Oh yeah, I can't imagine.
It's not like a respect issue.
Like you're trying to like gather fucking like criminal evidence of a case, and there's just fucking 20 people hanging around being like, yes, interesting.
Yeah, it was very that though. You know, the police would allow people to just like waltz into a murder scene, have a look around, waltz out, and it wasn't a problem.
Man, no.
Just leave their garbage on the floor.
Sure. Where else are you going to put it?
Well, there was that story. There was that case in Australia. Have you ever seen the Pajama Girl murder or Pajama Girl mystery? It's a giallo from like late 70s. It's based on a real story where a woman's burned body was found on the beach in Australia, and they could not figure it. This was part of like a larger, I don't know if it was a serial killer or something. They couldn't figure out her identity, so they put her on display, like in what is essentially a shopping mall.
What?
And just hundreds of people came to like try to identify the body, but most of them were just there just to look at the body.
Yeah,
it's
of
fucking
course.
creepy as hell.
Yeah.
How are you gonna identify a burned body? That's wild.
I know.
Yeah.
Jesus fucking Christ. Shit is just so weird. Yep. And then also because this is Universal and these horror movies are so hot. At one time, one of the other actors that Universal wanted to use for Praetorius was Bela Lugosi. And as much as I love Bela Lugosi and Claude Rains, Ernest Thesiger is just like perfect in this role. I can't imagine anybody else doing it.
And it's so close to Dracula as well. Like you would not have been able to escape that association.
This is yeah, for sure. Like there's definitely a weird ghoulishness about Thesiger that I think probably would have translated very well to Bela Lugosi. But he kind of had like one. As much as I love the guy, he kind of had one speed that he was really good at.
Yeah.
He is a one note. I think Thesiger plays it. He is campy in a way that Boris Karloff could not have been, probably because he is a little bit queeny. And I think that comes through in the character. I think it's supposed to come through in the character. But he also plays, there's a sort of, there's something sinister about him that is very subtle. Like it's not, Bela Lugosi would have been, he would have come in hot with that.
He would have been real big, yeah.
Yeah, and Thesiger, it comes through in ways that are really creepy at certain points because it's like he's very friendly, he's very campy and queeny. I mean, I found a great quote where someone said something about like a co-star of his at one point said, "I don't think he had a very strong male approach to anything," which I think is probably true, and it really works in this character because there's something a little harmless about him, but then every now and then there's this kind of malevolence to him that comes through in like a sneer or a look. And I don't think Bela Lugosi could have pulled that off. I definitely don't think Claude Rains could have pulled it off.
No.
And
the
like
thing
go.
Oh, I was just gonna say they lit him perfectly for that too.
Yes.
He was always just sneering, and every crease in his face was just highlighted. And even when they introduced him, they literally introduced him. I think it was Minnie was like, "There's a queer old man here to see you."
Yep.
So it was great.
Yeah, I think really the sort of subtle, like the undercurrent of the Praetorius character is really he's supposed to be sort of like the devil, right? And so there's like he's not like evil, he's not big, but he's sinister, and so there is a subtlety to it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Also, regarding he didn't have a very male approach to anything. I read a quote about how he would talk about the war because he served on the front in France in World War
and
I.
experienced like really horrible shit.
Yeah. He was discharged because of an injury sustained from shelling, and that shit's scary as fuck. Like I have heard the hardcore history series on World War I. It is one of the most nightmarish things I've ever fucking heard. This dude endured this shit. But when he was asked about it, he would talk about it. He'd be like, "Oh dear Lord, the noise and the people." Like that was how he would talk about the fucking
It would be
war.
like if someone sent me to World War I, I'd be like, "Oh God, again?"
Right? Yeah, too many people. Just this would be so much better with so few people. But I mean, World War I was just anybody I can imagine who served in World War I had no idea what they were in for. It was the first time
James
anybody
Whale
really
did as
saw
well.
like, yeah, that's right, exactly. And it's the first time anybody would have experienced any kind of like mechanical warfare, and you're being told you're going to go on this big great adventure, and then you're in literal hell.
It was the way that it was sold to them was like, hey, you get to go with all the boys from the neighborhood, and you're gonna have a good time. They're all fucking singing songs as they get on the fucking boat to go across the channel, and then they're dumped into these trenches that are muddy and full of rats and disease, and the Germans never stop shelling them.
Yeah,
and now it's full of mustard gas as well.
Right?
Oh, yeah, just an absolute shit show, horror. I can't fucking believe it.
And then
for a really long time I'd heard I was like, the English still kind of talk about World War I in this kind of traumatic way, and I didn't really understand it because you don't know much about it. They don't teach you much about that one in school. And then I heard that podcast series about it, and I was like, my God, what a fucking nightmare. This is the worst shit ever.
Right? And then almost on the topic of like being a monster or othered, people are coming back. They're literally missing limbs. They're missing noses. They're missing parts of their body. And they're completely shunned from society as a result, Yeah. So in that way, you can almost understand why like Frankenstein as a story kind of resonated with people.
Mm-hmm. For sure. 100%. Yeah. Yeah. Now, I want to bring this up here before we, sort of get into the meat of the story, because there has, for a long time, there has been really kind of since probably like the sort of reevaluation of it during the 70s, there has been like a sort of queer read of this story. And I wanted to get your thoughts on that because I'm not sure where I land on that.
Well, let me set it up what you're referring to. So essentially, Vito Russo was a kind of historian of sorts, an activist, like a gay activist in the 70s. Very, very influential and very important. He wrote a book that is called, Jesus Christ, I can't remember, something about the closet, celluloid closet.
Oh yeah,
I thought it was actually called Jesus Christ. I can't remember.
No, it's great, catchy title.
The real wordy title. No, it's called Celluloid Closet. So it is the first time that anyone had really given, paid a lot of attention to like because it's coming out at the same time as like cultural studies is coming about in England. And then, that's followed by American studies here. And so film studies in general, people are starting to realize that everybody has a sort of different read of things based on who you are, where you're at in society, and sort of what your life is. And so what the Celluloid Closet is a kind of an assessment of Hollywood and gay people. Like, really just kind of lesbians and gay men for the most part, and bisexuality. Mm-hmm. And his read on this is that the kind of the traditional queer read is that like Frankenstein is this sort of a story about like embracing unnatural things, and so in this one, what happens? Henry Frankenstein, he sort of decides to abandon his draw to the unnatural and is going to settle down and marry a woman and sort of leave all of that behind him, which if you're a gay man in, the early or, first half of the 20th century, that's probably a pretty familiar story. It happened to a lot of people, but it still happens, not nearly as much. And then so in this second one, he's going to marry this woman, and then along comes this kind of very queer Praetorius who's trying to sort of tempt him back to the dark side and sort of lure him back to homosexuality.
He literally wants to take him to go experiment in the night, Yeah, literally.
I mean, it's and I think in a lot of, you could say that Vito Russo's assessment of this is. And I think of in general of kind of queer reads of Hollywood movies, it's a very new thing at the time. So there's a lot of kind of subjectivity there. But in this case, it's a movie made by a gay man, starring a lot of gay people, and involving a lot of gay people. And so it's not so much of a stretch to think there probably is something to that. There's like, if you look at The Old Dark House, there's a lot of language in that's like, they know what they're doing. There's a lot of nods to that.
Yeah.
I'm not sure it's as evident in this movie. I think there is another kind of a more abstract read of it that suggests that like, this is a way, this story in particular is Frankenstein and his sort of male assistants and his teacher in this case are trying to kind of like bypass women and sort of to create life. Mm-hmm. And then in doing so, they're kind of denying them that like uniquely female power of creation of life. And so it sort of further subjugates women. It sort of robs them of the one thing that men absolutely cannot do without them. And that's sort of another, maybe a more feminist read of it. But I'm not sure, I'm not sure that I feel like there's a lot of queerness to this movie.
Yeah. because what I like, again, I hate to fall back on Harrington as much as I do, simply because, but he is really the only person who is still alive who is as close to Whale as he was, as, you know, further into the century as he was. So he's really kind of the only kind of like living mouthpiece for a long time that this guy had. And according to him, but also he seemed really grouchy about this entire concept himself. But his whole thing was like, it's fucking bullshit. It's just like new young people are just kind of coming up with stuff because they want to, you know, kind of fill in the blanks. But
I think that's valid. That's like super valid when if somebody wants to look at a piece of art and find a different interpretation into it. I think that's what can keep art alive. It's kind of what can make something a classic. If it can be constantly reinterpreted, you know, it's sort of like, okay, the artist puts the artwork out there, but then it's up to people to kind of ascribe an interpretation to it.
I love that, because I have talked about this very thing in previous episodes of this podcast where, you know, listener, feel free to challenge me, bringmethexpod@gmail.com. It's, to me, the sort of intention with which an artist sort of creates a piece is completely beside the point. You know, it's whatever it is like that they meant or they intended with it is not terribly important to me. It's really how I receive it, because like I have an entirely like my interpretation of this story, the sort of undercurrent, the subtleties of the story have more to do with like I have a much more esoteric read. It's more about Gnosticism to me than anything else. But that's just because that's kind of the position that I'm coming to this movie from. So I can see where, you know, if this is something, you know, you're writing an entire book about sort of like queer evaluations of movies from the past, then I can see where, you know, you would go, oh shit, like I'm connecting threads left and right. So it's like it's the same thing for me, just from an entirely different point of view. Like that's,
and I love that about. I think like you've made something really good if multiple people can look at something and find different interpretations. As I look at this movie, to me, it is queer as fuck everywhere. It's dripping. But maybe that's my own interpretation in regards to like how I perceive it, and that maybe is being influenced by my own experiences. But like for me, I can't escape the queer narrative. It's so apparent. People call it like a feminist film. I feel like it's less of a feminist film than it is a queer film, you know, but that's not my experience, you know?
I would say though, I would push back on Curtis Harrington in that I think all of what both of you just said is I agree with it all, but also these are men of a particular era when you really weren't allowed to imagine all these things. You didn't think about it's the same way that he says, well, you know, he's an artist first, you know, his sexuality never makes it into these things. That's not true at all. We know that. It's like when people say, you know, this is not a political thing. Of course it's political. Everything that anyone ever does, you bring every part of yourself to this. They just never had the luxury of considering that part of their lives as being valuable, because to them it was always a hindrance. So anything they ever did, it was always, you know, it's like they don't want to acknowledge that that's a part of it, because that was a thing that people would use to knock them down all the time. And so they would say, well, this is not about that. You can't say that it's a part of that. It's like when you're a gay man, that is a huge part of who you are, whether you want to acknowledge it or not. It is how other people perceive you, and it is the way they are going to interpret everything that you do. You don't have to think that that's the case, but it is. That's the truth. And so for them to come to it and be like, well, no, his sexuality never was a factor in any of this. Of course it was. It would be like being like, oh, well, so-and-so's marriage is not really, it doesn't factor into anything they do. And it's like, really? The person that you spend every day of your life with and have to like have sign off on fucking formal documents and shit, you don't think that matters in anything you do? It's like that kind of like, oh yeah, well, he's a father, but that's not really important. It's like, of course it is. That's going to inform everything that you do in a particular way.
Yeah.
Just like if you watch The Old Dark House or this, you're going to see that he's doing particular things. I mean, James Whale had a particular disdain for religion. There's a reason why, and it's the same fucking reason that people today, gay men today, have a particular disdain for religion. It's like, that's why Praetorius, when he talks about all of these things, he sort of spits his lines out, because he also has a particular disdain. So to say that these things aren't a factor, it's just not true. Now, how you want to receive it is a completely separate issue. But I think for Harrington, who also kind of came of age in the 30s and 40s, very few people were able to be like, my queerness or whatever they want to call it is a part of what I'm doing. Kenneth Anger did it, but Kenneth Anger had a shitload of money and didn't care about anybody else. Like, you had to be a rich sociopath essentially, and that was the only way you could really be that way.
Yeah, Kenneth Anger did a lot of questionable things as well,
Yeah.
And he could do it because he didn't have to rely on anybody else, Yeah. But yeah, I think that's exactly it. Whether it was intentional, they probably didn't even have the language that we can use today to look at a movie like this and find that kind of queer theory. Queer theory didn't exist, at least not in any kind of academic way.
Right. And that is a huge luxury to be able to sit back and look at these things in that way, because just to talk about that part of your life at that time was dangerous. And it was physically dangerous to you, certainly emotionally and psychologically dangerous. And so to go a step further and say, gee, I wonder how that part of me has made its way into my work, you wouldn't have even ventured there, because it was nothing good was going to come of it.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, there's also a matter of like there's the social and kind of cultural condition of this. Like these guys are from a generation even before the boomers, and so like this is something that we don't even have the fucking language to sort of approach. It was something that like I don't think anybody alive today even has the experience to sort of address. It's something that's like a fundamentally different kind of queerness. At least in the way that it was sort of handled in their lives at the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's true, because I even like watching this and finding like that queer narrative in there. I feel like as we understand queer experiences more, I can read more into like the things that happen. The fact that you have this bride who is made for Frankenstein's monster, and of course, there's like a whole issue in regards to that. But like, if you look at Frankenstein's monster as this like queer character, then by nature, by association, the bride is also this queer character. But you have her further shunning, the monster. She is against the monster as much as she is a part of that kind of community. And you see that within the queer community as well. You see a lot of like gay men and gay women completely writing off, bisexuality, bi erasure, people who don't accept within the queer community itself, that you have people that don't accept trans identities and trans experiences. And in a way, kind of when you look at how she reacts to him, it's almost sort of a reflection of that fracture within the community, where yes, we are a part of the queer community, but there's not always a togetherness amongst everybody. And
I think of that as a lot, and maybe, when we get to that point in this movie, I think it might be worth looking more at that, but it's a lot of that, like, well, yeah, sure, I'm that, but I'm not that like them, I'm not that version of it.
Exactly, yeah.
Which again comes down to homophobia. I mean, it's internalized homophobia. It's something that I spent decades struggling with, is like, well, yeah, but I'm not like I'm gay, but I'm not a fag. And it's like, oh, geez, that's a horrible thing to think about yourself. It's a horrible thing to infer about other people.
Absolutely. Yeah. But like when you watch this movie, it's like, were they thinking that at the time? Probably not. But does it come through in some kind of subconscious way?
Right.
Probably.
I mean, they couldn't acknowledge it, but it was probably what they were thinking. It's the same reason why, like, James Whale is a buttoned up gay man, because that's what is acceptable. That's what people are willing to tolerate. Mm-hmm. Because to go any further, you're Ernest Thesiger.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. Like that's the way the world is going to see you. It's just like whatever you intend to carry yourself and how you want the world to see you, that doesn't really matter. They're going to see you how they're going to see you. And that's going to be informed by all of their baggage and bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
Shall we dive in?
Let's do it.
Let's get into this story.
All right. Because we open on a stormy night in a sweet model castle as Lloyd Byron, England's greatest sinner, he says, along with his friend Percy Shelley and Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley, brutally roll their R's as they speak.
Yeah, really. I love, even before we get to them, the title card comes up and it says that it is suggested by Shelley's story. And I thought, what a wonderful way. Like, you know what? We don't really know if she would have liked this movie, but I feel like this is what she wanted us to do with the rest of her story.
Yeah, we got out the Ouija board. We figured it all out. We're good, you know.
Yeah. And these are the queeniest three you could come up with. Like they're calling each other darling, and they are fucking flouncing around this giant castle.
But like that's who Mary Shelley would have rolled with. That was
two dudes dressed like Little Lord Fauntleroy, just
it really
dapped up, dandy, foppish boys.
Mary Shelley and her gay husband and his boyfriend essentially is what they were.
Okay,
I think that is actually what they really were.
Yes. So here's the thing. Going back to the Hays Code, there was some dialogue in there that originally, before the code had it cut, essentially it was innuendo, suggested that they were this sort of like libertine throuple, the kind of a poly
and
thing.
they were. In reality, they were essentially, because I'm pretty sure he was gay.
Yeah, and I think she was bi as well, or it's assumed.
Yeah. But there's basically some lines of dialogue that had to be removed that essentially insulted this most sacred institution of marriage, and we cannot have that. This whole
movie, that's the great thing about the movie, is like, in addition to a lot of things that he's doing, there is a lot of mockery of sort of heteronormativity in this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like the entire character of Elizabeth is such a throwaway character. Yeah. She is there to sort of get a little hysterical and kind of faint and throw herself on
she is basically the character equivalent of women. Am I right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. She actually reminded me of like her delivery and the way in which she just like carried through the film at the end of like A Nightmare on Elm Street, Nancy's mom, when she's just kind of this like daisy woman that's just like kind of like staring at your ear. It's like she can't look you in the eye. She has to like look at your ear. It was just kind of that like aloofness. And I was like,
well, that's because I think in Nightmare on Elm Street, she was drunk the whole time and just needed to pick a point to focus on.
Yeah, it was giving me that though.
Yeah. So Byron remarks on Mary's latest work while she busies herself with needlepoint, a detail that I'm sure must have come from Thesiger, who apparently was a real needlepoint fan and was apparently extremely skilled at it. Something that
he would like sell his shit, and he like had had it all on display at his house and stuff.
Wow.
Yep. Yep. So what does he say? Byron says, "Can you believe that such a bland and lovely brow conceived of Frankenstein?" Which sounds like such a backhanded compliment.
Yeah, what a shady thing to say to someone. Can you believe this bitch wrote this story?
Yep.
Yeah.
It is kind of interesting to think that this scene is essentially pushing back on these idea of gender norms in terms of like writing, that a woman could write this horrifying story, and she was just kind of like, yeah, of course I can, you fucking idiots.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. Mary Shelley was the original goth girlfriend. Like, she wrote this book when she was 18 years old, and this shit is ghastly as hell. Like, it's gothic as fuck. It's stuff that like people like 100 years later are still like, yeah, damn, that shit's real, and I've been stealing.
And she rolled her eyes at everybody.
Oh
yes.
yeah. Didn't she lose her virginity on her mother's grave or something like that?
Allegedly,
she was a freak. Yeah.
I love it. So so Lanchester herself was originally simply cast as Mary Shelley here, but Whale thought it would be awesome if she played the dual role, and he was right, because she was not the original first choice for the bride. He originally wanted Brigitte Helm, who was in Metropolis is the one that she's best known for.
Oh.
And then she fell through, and they turned to Phyllis Brooks, who was not interested in doing a horror movie apparently, and he was like, you know what, fuck it, Elsa, why don't you do this? And she was like, yeah, sure.
And she's great. I mean, even in these opening scenes, because she's a very kind of captivating looking person. She's a gorgeous woman.
She's very beautiful.
But she's very sort of odd looking and very unique. She's a great actor. She does these roles in such different ways. It's like, it is, they got real lucky with this.
Yeah. And the thing that has to be remembered is she shows up in this movie. She's here in the beginning. She's got a bit of dialogue, and then she is gone until the very end of the movie. And the bride is in this movie for like 5 minutes, maybe.
Yeah.
And she's a fucking weird as hell character.
Yeah, and she's left a crazy fucking just like mark on pop culture. Like, I can't tell you how much Bride of Frankenstein shit I have in my house. And she's in
Which I think is kind of funny. I think it's funny because there's a lot of like Valentine's Day stuff. Like, if you like horror, they will find any way to fucking market to horror people. And there's a lot of like Valentine's romantic stuff. And it's like, do these people forget the end of this movie? Because this is not a romantic story.
Yeah,
not at all.
They have not seen the movie because I actually have like one of the T-shirts I have is the two of them in the style of the lovers from the tarot, and I fully understand like that just does not make any fucking sense, but I don't give a shit. I love it.
Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah. But you're totally right. It's part of the zeitgeist now. It's like, you know that image before you even know this movie nowadays, I'd imagine, because she's everywhere. Yeah.
It's that crazy hair too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, but back to this scene. What's really kind of crazy about this is it's a real sort of like banger of a setup. But the thing you got to bear in mind is it's just a setup to remind you of what happened in the last movie.
Yeah, it's last time on Frankenstein.
Yeah. So like the scene, they say Henry Frankenstein is obsessed with creating life from dead tissue. He and his fiendish sidekick steal a couple of corpses and make a man out of spare body parts, which comes to life and runs out of control, killing a local child, which causes locals to form a mob and chase him to a nearby windmill, which they set fire to. The creature throws Frankenstein from the windmill, presumably killing him before he's consumed by fire itself. But that is not the actual story. There was more to it in Shelley's story. Frankenstein, the sequel, doesn't cover it all. It hits just the sort of the broad strokes. So we now sort of fade to mise en scène. We find ourselves with the mob at the foot of the windmill as it topples over, and everyone is just having a great time as it burns, especially Minnie. She's
she's here for her cackling skills.
Yeah. And she's mighty overdressed, I will say, for the occasion.
She's got a weird fucking dress and like a headpiece that goes with it. And every time there's like a flare up from the fire, she's like, woo! Like she gets really excited. Yeah. This is an actress named Una O'Connor. We've talked about her a bunch already. She's also in The Invisible Man, playing the exact same character, and she's just as great. I'd never get tired of this character because she keeps showing up.
Fantastic.
She keeps showing up and doing this, and every time she does it, there's some guy right next to her who's just like, "Shut up, you!" And like, that's kind of like the entire arc of this character.
Yeah, exactly. She's just there to exclaim and scream and complain. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and she will do it the whole movie.
Yep. So now,
every single scene with her is like, some fucking guy is here, and then she shrieks.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she's just carrying on and freaking out until the burgomaster comes along, tells everybody to break it up and go home. These are decent people who need to be in bed. So they've recovered Henry's body, and Minnie laments that Henry was supposed to be married tonight. So they bring the body home. And then Minnie cries over it. And of course, the burgomaster tells her to shut up.
Yeah, they're all real broken up about Henry Frankenstein's death. And it's like, you guys weren't that nice to him in the last one.
He did create a monster that went wild and killed a little girl, remember?
Look, I maintain that girl had it coming. Actually, also, if you're going to raise a child next to a river and she doesn't know how to swim, that's on you, man.
Right? That is why we have La Llorona.
Exactly.
Yeah. And to keep you
he's
about
there's more comeuppance coming for that family in a minute.
Yeah. So now with the crowd dispersed, Hans and his wife, parents of the murdered girl from the last one. Actually, she wasn't even murdered. The monster threw her into the water, thinking they were having fun.
Yeah, so, that's what I'm saying. Like, you can't live next to the water and not teach your daughter how to swim. Yeah. If she's going to fucking sit next to the water and throw shit into it.
Yeah. And where was Hans?
Irresponsible.
Where was Hans?
Bad parenting.
Yep. So they're hanging out. He wants to be sure that the creature is dead. So they're looking into the wreckage, and he slips and he falls into the well below. Now, as he struggles to the surface, we see that the creature has also survived the fire and angrily drowns Hans. And now
that is a fucking cool ass reveal though, when he just sort of comes creeping out of the shadows, all fucked up looking.
Yeah.
So this is the scene where Karloff like fell into the well and hurt himself. So like all of the surrounding scenes that they're shooting in this location here, it's him in terrible fucking pain. So Hans' wife also waits by the edge calling to him, and then she reaches down and like helps who she thinks is Hans out of the well, but it's the creature who throws her down into the well before the eyes of a very unimpressed owl.
Yeah, the owl didn't give a fuck.
No.
Yeah, it's as if to say, I've seen better.
I know, he's
Yeah,
he's like a dinosaur in the Flintstones. It's like, it's a living. So the creature then sneaks up on Minnie, who does some really silly comedy face shit before she runs back off. She's like, hamina, 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 before she like
Really is.
runs. Yeah. And I'm not exaggerating all that much.
Not at all.
It
This
really,
is where
like, the only thing, it would have topped it if she had like the Scooby-Doo paddling feet. Like,
with that crazy bongos sound effect.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yakety Yak starts playing in the background, and she's just zipping over the hill. Yeah, it was at this moment where you knew that like they weren't necessarily going for the chills with this movie, because that could have been a very frightening moment if executed differently.
Nope.
And I think that is a testament to James Whale's sort of brilliance as a director, is like, not only because he felt like I can't top what we already did, so I'm going to go a completely different direction with this. It's smart to be like, I don't want to be scary. Also, this is not going to be scary. Let's be a little bit goofy and sarcastic.
Yeah, it worked.
Yeah, because I would say that the original Frankenstein is definitely a sort of sleepy gothic affair, like where this one's really kind of like a thrill a minute and very exciting. That one is a much slower movie that really kind of like lives on its atmosphere and vibes, right? There's none of that in this movie.
Not so much.
No, it's a zinger a minute in this one.
No. So the mob brings Henry's body back to his fiancée, Elizabeth, while Minnie reports that the creature is back. Again, she's told to shut up.
Yeah, and she says her response is, let them all be murdered in their beds. And my note is, yeah, that's pretty much how I'd respond too.
Right? Like, I'm there with
like,
you, girl.
fuck these people.
Yeah.
Also, Elizabeth is played by an actress named Valerie Hobson. She was 17 when they made this movie.
She looks like she's about 35 in this movie.
Yeah. 17 years old. Yeah.
And he deliberately kept them all apart from each other for a lot of this, so they would have sort of more natural reactions when they were like the big reveals for things. And so she didn't really get to know any of them, and she's kind of like this demure girl for most of the movie. Like, she would just sort of be like on the set. She's like, I'm picturing her like Angela in Sleepaway Camp. Like, she's just sort of like wide-eyed and doesn't know what's happening. Yeah. Meanwhile, everyone's drunk and dying.
It's basically just like Sleepaway Camp, and somebody comes up and is like, yo, Valerie, why are you so fucked up?
Pretty much.
Yeah. Oh my God. And like, they put her in this unmovable dress. This dress that they put her in, I don't even know.
The costuming in this looks like they are just trussed up from ankles to neck. Elsa Lanchester, when she's in that sort of like mummy getup that they've got the body in, they had to like put her on a cart and wheel her around the set for like days.
I imagine
they did it so she'd stop flashing everybody.
Exactly.
Yeah. So when they bring Henry into the main hall of his castle, this is a fucking awesome detail. You can see the shadow shaped like the monster looming over him, cast on the back wall.
It's so fucking cool, and it looks like it's like that, a little bit like that shadow scene in
Dark House. Oh, yes.
Where she's doing the pointing thing. It's so cool.
So everybody thinks Henry is dead, but he suddenly moves, which sends Minnie into another screaming fit as he regains consciousness. And so now he lays in bed recovering, and Elizabeth plans for them to leave to a place where he can recover in peace and put the whole Frankenstein thing behind him. But he remains obsessed with discovering the secret to creating life. It's like a curse. And he's like,
and it's a good thing that Frankenstein is supposed to look sickly, because Colin Clive looks like shit in this scene.
Yeah.
he looks like he has been bathing in gin, essentially.
He also broke his leg on this, and there's a reason why you don't see him from the waist up a lot. And it's because he's sitting down for a lot of the movie.
Right.
Dang.
Yeah. So
I think his was like a drunken fall.
Probably.
Okay. So it was on him.
Oh, for 100%, yeah. So Elizabeth becomes hysterical, seeing a phantom drawing near that will take Henry from her. And of course, there's nobody in the room with them, but she's like pointing. He's like, he's right there. He's coming nearer. He's coming nearer. And so as she's collapsing, there's a pounding on the door of the manor, and Minnie admits the cadaverous Doctor Praetorius into the house.
Yeah, this is when she says he's a very queer-looking old gentleman.
Yep.
Yes.
And you know what? She's not wrong.
Not at all.
No. She brings him up to Henry's room. And the thing is like, she's like, who are you? And he's like, I'm a friend. Don't worry about it. And she's like, and he's like, I said, don't worry about it. And she's like, okay, fine. And brings him in. And so she brings him to Henry's room, introduces him. Henry knows him. He used to be a professor of philosophy, but was given the boot from the university for knowing too much.
It's a good reason to get kicked at anything.
He looks at Elizabeth with disdain.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Because again, he looks at her and he's like, women, am I right?
So when alone, Praetorius tells Frankenstein that they have to work together. They're working on a similar project. Frankenstein protests, but Praetorius convinces him otherwise. He has his own project they would like to show him.
So what he says here, I think, is really interesting, because I think this is where he says it. Where he says, you and I have gone too far to stop, nor can it be stopped so easily. And I think if you're reading this in that queer way, it has that idea of like, no, you've already engaged in something. Like, you can't take it back now. You can't go back.
Yeah. Very queer coded, for sure.
Because he follows it up with like a few minutes later is the line where he says, science, like love, has her little surprises.
Yes.
Which is a very, very gay thing to say.
Mm-hmm. His wrists were just like flopping when he said it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that's the best thing about him, though, is like he is very clearly intended to be this sort of invading character, this like invading force. And he comes in, I'm trying not to use the F word here, but like he is coming in flailing about, and he's such a good actor, but he's so foppish in this way that you're like, there's no other way to interpret this guy than he's very clearly gay, and he just sort of comes in to fuck with their marriage. I wish he wasn't the sort of like malevolent force.
Right.
But there's no other way to read him, but like, here's this sort of faggy guy kind of cruising into their house to be like, hey, gotta steal your husband for a while. We'll be back. Bye.
Yeah, gonna go experiment, you know.
Yeah.
It's a thing we started a while ago. Bye.
Got a couple of loose ends to tie up. Yeah, no, he's a total queen. Total queen. In and out.
Yeah. So, hey, without a second thought, Frankenstein abandons his plans to retire from the forbidden sciences and marry his fiancée, takes off to Praetorius' laboratory in the night.
Mm-hmm. He really is. There's like so little hesitation, because he's just like, no, I mustn't do it. I have to. And it's like, girl, 5 seconds ago, you were talking about how intoxicating this all is and how you can't live without it. Now you're willing to leave and go marry this woman. And then he's like, but on second thought, you do make a good argument, sir.
I mean, that is a point.
Sure,
that
I'll follow you to the bushes.
This point carries on throughout this whole movie, though. He's just constantly hot, cold, hot, cold, hot, cold.
Well,
Can't make up his mind.
Yeah, we talked about this like not 1 week ago when we did Rocky Horror, and we were talking about Susan Sarandon and her kind of like Douglas Sirk moment where she kind of goes through the same sort of motion, and sort of Brad also kind of encounters the same sort of thing.
Yeah, it's very much like, no, I couldn't possibly. Okay.
Yeah. But it's like that thing, you get that person that likes to sing, and they go to the dinner party, and then someone's like, oh, why don't you just sing this song around the piano? And they're like, no, I couldn't. And then they just get asked one more time, and they're on the piano, you know? It's like, yeah, they just need to be egged on a little bit. They want to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's all part of the show, really.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, so when they get there, one of the first thing that they do is Praetorius produces a couple glasses, pours him some gin, which he says is his only weakness. And then
the first time he'll say that. But
Yes.
and then he toasts to gods and monsters.
Which is
he
such
drinking
a
out of
fucking awesome line.
It really is. This movie's got some killer one-liners in it.
It does. But is he drinking out of a beaker as well? Or is it just like
I
a weird
think they're
glass?
just shot glasses.
Yeah,
they're
okay.
like small
Little-
glasses.
Yeah, there's like
Because I was going
little
to say,
glasses.
if he's drinking out of his laboratory supplies, that might explain Praetorius a little bit more.
It would have been better
It would
if
have
he
been
was.
it would have been an awesome stylistic touch for sure. So yeah,
I'm not sure what to make of this scene, though. It's like, I feel like this was just sort of like, well, we've come a little bit of a ways from earlier Hollywood. Let's show them what we've got.
oh yeah, yeah,
One
it is.
100%.
It was like he was like, I did something fucking awesome in the Invisible Man, because like those the Invisible Man special effects are super cool even today. So he was like, I got to do something awesome like that in this one, and so it's not. I don't think that this scene is nearly as impressive as the Invisible Man, but it's still very cool, and it's very silly and very offbeat. Because I don't know what he ends up does. He goes back and he gets this case out. And he lays it down. He's like, "Let me show you my experiments." And he pulls out these like bell jars that are all covered up, and he reveals them one by one, and each one contains a little person.
Yeah.
And they're all like, with a couple of exceptions, they're like trumps from the major arcana in the tarot. There's a king, there's a queen, there's a hierophant, there's the devil. There's also a ballerina and a mermaid.
Yeah.
And they're all like,
The mermaid's the coolest part.
Oh, hell
definitely
yeah.
the coolest. Yeah, but the
It's
thing
like
is
sea
like,
monkeys on steroids.
Yeah.
yeah, but like as they're sitting there talking, like you see, Praetorius is there, and he's got these little jars containing these little people in front of him. It's a very, very impressive special effect.
But it has like this sort of like Lilliputian silliness to it that I'm kind of like, what is this? What is the point of this other
yeah.
than to fill space? And I was like trying to kind of game it out in my head. And I was like, well, I guess if anything, it sort of shows that like Praetorius is a scientist of a particular skill level, and he is only able to come this far. He needs Frankenstein's knowledge to take it the next step. He can't do it alone, which again, pretty gay.
Yeah, it's true. But it's also like, when you look at what Praetorius has done, he's made these tiny little people. He's made a mermaid, a viable living mermaid. Yet that is somehow not as impressive as reanimating a corpse.
Well, I think that's
right?
part of I think the larger story here is that like Praetorius has made these living things. They're not like piecemeal monsters that are patched together from dead parts. Like that's his whole allure is like, no, you've reanimated dead flesh. I have created life from nothing.
Right, because Praetorius is kind of shitty to him about the way
Yes.
that Frankenstein does his thing. But yeah, but like to your point, like this is as far as he's gotten. Like it's no less impressive, but like they're just little people in jars. Like Frankenstein's got a dude who's like up and running around and terrorizing the neighborhood.
Yeah.
And then in the end, they're just gonna do what what they did in the first one again. Like they're not. It's not like they're gonna take this knowledge and apply it, because when they make the bride, they're really just doing the thing again from the first movie.
Right.
You're
yeah.
right. Yeah. Yeah, so I think to that point, I think this was just sort of a scene to just show off some pretty cool special effects.
Yeah.
100%.
I feel like I'm kind of overthinking it a little bit. It's just kind of like, well, they had to fill the runtime. Because remember, this is 2 hours of terror. And it's like, well, if by that you mean an hour and 15 minutes, sure.
Yeah.
That's 2 hours,
But
give or take.
there are scenes in this movie that were in there simply to pad it out, because like they did.
Well, that's what the opening scene is it's there to kind of pad the runtime.
Yeah. So, Praetorius also remarks that the devil looks a little bit like him, don't you think?
Oh,
That's
yeah.
his whole thing. That's his whole thing. Is the stated intention for Praetorius's characters? He's supposed to be Mephistopheles to Frankenstein's Faust,
But in that like very Daniel or a Devil and Daniel Webster kind of way, where he's like, I'm really just a scamp, aren't I?
Yeah.
And that is the only
reveling in
time you're ever going to hear me make that noise.
Not
I don't know, though. Maybe I'll bring it back.
Not if I can help it. So Frankenstein is horrified, but Praetorius rebukes him, claiming that Frankenstein's method of sourcing from corpses is a terrible way, and he sources from seed, implying that these miniature people are all made from semen. He also rolls out their new plan. They'll make a mate for the monster, a woman, you see.
But even this idea of like, well, I'm not like you. It has that very, like, again, what Tyler, you were saying earlier, this idea of like, well, yeah, sure, maybe I did this in the past, but I'm not like you. I'm not going to keep living this way. You can read this, if you're watching this as a, if you're Vito Russo in the 70s, where your whole life is about kind of gay activism, you're seeing this everywhere. And you're like, oh, I know what that means. And it's like, well, you might not actually be that far off, because as it turns out, the people who made this have probably said very similar shit in the past.
Well, it's true. I mean, I even know with my own experience in coming to terms with the fact that I was gay, it was very easy for me to ignore it as a teenager when there was no one else around me who was out and open. But then once I went off to university and I saw other queer people just literally being themselves, it became impossible to ignore, So it's very easy if you're able to curate your life in such a way that you don't have this reminder or even this realization that, oh wait, I'm a lot more like you than I realized. Right.
So I can handle it alone. When I'm by myself, I can handle those thoughts. It's like, as long as I'm not in a situation where I'm confronted with it, then it's fine.
Exactly. So it feels sort of like that moment. If you want it to break this down, it's just like, okay, yeah, now you can't ignore it. Now you got to go experimenting.
So, meanwhile, the monster roams the forest. First, he
he just cannot catch a break either.
He frightens a shepherd woman, and it's mostly just she sees him and freaks out, and he's like, no, it's all cool. It's good. And she's like, and then falls off of a cliff into a nearby pond. And he jumps in and fucking rescues her, and she continues to scream and scream and scream.
But it's a real tell me again about the rabbits, Lenny kind of moment, because he's like covering her mouth and shit. And I'm like, no. That if you want to calm her down, don't cover her face with your hands. That's some real serial killer shit you're doing.
Your meaty monster hands.
Your giant burned up monster hands.
So nobody in this universe really seems to understand body language whatsoever.
No.
No, this attracts some nearby hunters who wound the monster with a gunshot to the arm, and then they gather another mob and chase him around the forest some more. And now the monster hides behind a rock on a cliff, but when cornered there, he pushes the rock on a couple of hunters. And then there's too many people, and they overpower him, tying him to a pole. Minnie is there, of course, because she's because she's crazy.
Because somebody has to shriek and scream.
She's just talking shit the whole time. She's like, make sure you tie him down real good, or I'll have to do it myself.
Yeah, she's real like, oh, I could do that. I could do this better than you guys. And I'm like, hey, you know what? She probably could.
Right? Yeah. That's it. Minnie's got something she needs to work out. Not sure what it is, but there's something there.
It's just got a lot of energy.
All these men have been telling her to shut up for years, and she has about fucking had it with them.
Yeah. So the mob takes him back to town, bars him up in a dungeon, chaining him to a big chair. This chair, of course, ain't shit, and the monster very easily breaks free, smashing down the dungeon doors and escaping once more into the forest. There is a detail in the scene where they're chaining him up that I think is really interesting, because every time they hit, they take a hammer to these like eye bolts basically as they're hammering down. Every time they hit the hammer or they hammer it into the boards, he reacts like it's being hammered into him.
Oh, and do you think this is kind of that like tie back to Christianity or something?
Yes, I do. This is not the last time we're going to see like religious iconography, and there's even a scene that was cut from the script by the Hays Code that's like just overtly like a weird sort of
the crucifixion scene.
Yes.
Well, I think in this scene, what it's doing is when they're the eye bolt, they're pounding it in. It's pulling the chain tighter across his chest or his neck or whatever.
Okay.
But that scene, I think it's later when he's in the cemetery is when you see that sort of cruciform moment. Because I think there's photographs of it.
Yeah. But so in the panic, the locals discover that the monster has once again killed a little girl and another woman in the village. And according to one source that I read when I was doing the research, the little girl who's like, oh yes, look over there. She's the girl who plays the actual like murdered little girl from the first one. And Whale cast her in this as an extra, but wanted her, because of her involvement in the last one, he wanted her to get paid a little bit more. So he gave her a line of dialogue so that they couldn't pay her for just being an extra.
Oh, wow. Yep.
Yeah.
That's kind of fun.
Yeah, nice guy.
Yeah.
So, then this night in the forest, the monster attacks Gypsy Camp.
I love it because this is where the gypsy mother, she's got her priorities fight. She's like, first, dinner. Second, monster.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You don't want to go screaming into the forest on an empty stomach. You got to eat. So
exactly.
I feel like this is how I would approach everything. I'd be like, yeah, monster. But also, we were talking about sandwiches earlier. How's everybody feeling?
Yeah, that's it. Because like a hangry me is no match for Frankenstein. You know.
Nope.
Yeah. So this is one of the insert scenes. This is just pure padding. There's not even music in this scene.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it also feels like a lot of these scenes feel like they've been ripped from other movies. They're not. Like the whole movie is shot.
Oh no, but
for this specific purpose. But like you feel like there's a lot of stuff where I'm like, all these sets look very familiar.
There's a part earlier when Minnie goes up after they find the dead little girl. Like they're also in that sort of like boarding house, and Minnie runs up the steps into the apartment,
and it looks exactly like Invisible Man. It's not the same set but it looks exactly like it.
Yeah.
But the house that they're in at the beginning, when they bring it back to the castle, I think that's the same house that they use pretty extensively in Son of Frankenstein, because I think they made that the very next year.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Oh. And I think in this one, the laboratory is the same from the first one, right? At the end,
I believe so. Or if not the set, at least the set decoration and the props and stuff. Pretty sure are.
Yeah.
Because they fucking Universal didn't throw a damn thing away.
No, and it would make sense that they were producing so many of these like gothic bees that they probably were just like, no, don't strike the set, keep it. We're gonna use this next week in the Son of blah whatever.
Yeah, I remember when we had Sam Pancake was on. Last year we did a Burnt Offerings with Sam Pancake, and he was telling us about how he had done something for Warner Brothers, and he was like wearing some pants and looked in the lining of the pants, and it said Ricardo Montalban in it. And he was like wearing Ricardo Montalban's pants from like the 70s.
Wow.
Yeah, like they do not throw anything away. Yeah, and you know what? That's great. Sustainability.
Reduce, reuse, recycle. Yes.
That's what I was gonna say.
So, so in the night, the monster is attracted to a cabin, which houses a single blind hermit who plays a fiddle. The music soothes the creature, and the man's inability to see him and run in fright is welcoming to him. And
so this is another scene that I think, again, has a really heavy queer reading, because it's homosocial broadly. Like, that's the way it's presented. But what the hermit is essentially suggesting is like, I have prayed to God for a companion, and God has sent me a man I can take care of, a man I can essentially treat as a husband in the 30s, because that is more or less what he says, is like, I will take care of you. I will bring, I will nurse you back to health, and you will bring me joy. And it's like, he is describing a marriage.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah, also, more tarot iconography in this scene.
Oh, the hermit, of course.
Yep. Very like hard too, like the original like Rider-Waite tarot hermit.
Yeah,
reads pretty heavy. Also, I don't know if anybody is a big fan of Dark Shadows, much like myself. This is Dark Shadows lifted pretty much every storyline in that show was pulled from these Universal stories. This particular one takes up way too much time of a later season, but it is like the same exact story. It is obnoxious as hell. It's all I kept thinking of.
Dan Curtis was like, listen, we're going to get 100 episodes out of this one.
Yeah.
He really did. Out of this fucking scene, this 1 5-minute scene in this movie, he's like, no, I got it. It'll take up the whole season.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, this is did you know when they did this in Young Frankenstein and they do it with Gene Hackman? Gene Hackman's not credited for that role at all. Nope. That's crazy.
I didn't know that.
So yeah, but anyways, the hermit is kind to him, and I do love this little scene. I just kind of wish it could go on forever, and Frankenstein's monster and the hermit could just like chill out and drink wine and smoke cigars and just play music.
I actually have a note that is just like, and then they lived happily ever after. The end.
Let's end it there. He, the hermit, is the bride of Frankenstein. Here we go. There we go.
Yep, there you go. But it is like, this is a little bit of kind of a, I don't know how subtle it is. It feels a little heavy-handed to me, but like, it's this idea of like, well, he can't see him, and so without that, he wouldn't be biased against him. And it's like, yeah, but he also doesn't seem to notice when he touches him that this man is mangled and gigantic.
It's true. Maybe that's his
So he's
type.
overlooking a lot because he's desperate.
Yeah.
He's like, I tried the apps and it doesn't work.
Yeah, I've ignored all
Settle
the red
for
flags.
this.
Yeah.
No, it's two outsiders finding one another.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. It's great.
But he treats him with kindness, and he feeds him, and he's lonely out there in the forest with no one to hang with. And in their time together, he takes care of the monster, he treats his injuries, and he teaches him to speak a little bit.
Yeah.
And he also teaches him to drink and smoke like a sailor.
Yeah. And the kindness causes the monster to cry.
That's true.
Yep. So everything's
Because the hermit is crying from like the second Frankenstein's monster walks in. He's just like, oh, thank God.
Right?
I've been dreaming of a mangled dead man at my door.
This hermit seems to attract a lot of men to his door, judging by this
He really
movie.
does.
Oh, yeah.
For, he talks about how like no one ever comes out here. I'm like, really? Because 3 people come out here in the next 4 minutes.
I know, this 5-minute segment of the movie is just an embarrassment of riches in terms of dudes. So everything's going great. They share bread and wine, but also cigars. Lighting his cigars, of course, sets the monster off. Fire, you see. But he does love a good cigar.
And a jaunty tune.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. They're just chilling out, minding their own business, not hurting nobody, when along come 2 hunters lost in the woods. Do you know one of them?
When in bursts my favorite Dracula, John Carradine.
I was just about to say, John Carradine is one of those guys.
John Carradine was a real good-looking dude when he was young.
Yep. So, seeing the monster, they freak out, try to kill him, which results in the cabin catching fire. So they run off.
My note says, you can't just go into people's houses and start shooting. Who do you think you are? The police? Hey-oh, timely.
Oh my gosh, yeah, it's funny, but it's true. You know.
So now he wanders back out into the forest, alarming a group of little girls who are just running around out in the forest at night.
Yeah. As you know, groups of little girls do, it seems, at least in this movie.
At least in the Universal movies.
Yeah.
Yeah, here in these Bavarian woods, you've got sheep and little girls just roaming around.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, they go running and screaming. By night, he wanders into a cemetery to hide. Now, this is the scene that was originally supposed to feature the monster. He sees, because he walks in and there's that big crucifix and there's also the statue. And what he does is he throws the statue aside and he finds the crypt. But originally, what he saw was Jesus on the cross and sort of was like, oh, it's another sort of like tortured man like myself. And he's like, does what he can to like free Jesus from the cross, but instead destroys the crucifix. And the Hays Code was like, that's not happening in this movie. So
because Whale was not precious about religion at all, because he didn't care for it. He did, so like, there's a lot of like going back to the Old Dark House, there's a lot of dialogue in the Old Dark House where they talk some hard shit about religion.
Yeah.
And even in this, like you see it, but like there's, I don't know why, but in my head, I'm picturing this scene, like the scene in Reagan's bedroom in The Exorcist, when they cut to like, she's backlit and she looks like the demon.
Oh yeah.
Like she's sort of looks like she's climbing. Like, I don't know why in my head that's what I'm picturing for this scene where he's crucified, because I think I've seen photographs of this.
So they did film it, but they just weren't able to release it.
I don't know.
I don't think so, because I think at least from what I read, it was a written part of the script that the censors, they read and they were like, yeah, you can't do that.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah, so never went to screen. Yeah.
Yeah.
But there was like, it was kind of juxtaposed to that scene where Frankenstein's, I think, falling asleep at the hermit's place, and then it hovers on
that's right.
the crucifix, and there's like an overlay of it.
Yeah, it fades. The entire scene fades out, but then the crucifix is like lit still a little bit before it fades out. Yeah.
Yeah, and then a little while later, it's almost mirrored here as he's going down into the crypt.
Yeah. Yeah. I know I can only speculate about what Wales' experience with Christianity was like, because like the Anglican Church was sort of like what the kind of evangelical American government crossover is like right now, but like way before that, was like before Christianity was like a real political force in the United States. It was always like state religion in England. So it's got to be it must have been like way more ubiquitous in terms of his sort of like his upbringing there, and like he probably just had really fucking conflicting feelings about the whole thing. Ultimately,
well, then you also go to war too, and you see the most hideous, horrible things, and it's like, how do you reconcile any of this?
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah.
So yeah, the monster knocks over a statue, revealing a crypt, and he hides out in it while the mob runs through, none the wiser. So now, while in the crypt, the creature finds a recently deceased body of a woman in her veil and declares her a friend because she doesn't run in fear.
Yeah, that honestly, this was like the most heartbreaking moment of this entire movie.
That is a really low bar.
Yeah.
Yep. However, Praetorius happens to be in the same crypt with his two nasty henchmen, appearing to seek out body parts for their next creation. And when their work is done,
he's bad because he's eating a sandwich in there.
I know, he's like the earliest incarnation of the medical examiner eating a sandwich trope.
Yeah.
So,
he lays it all out and like sets up a little weird altar.
Oh yeah, he sets up the fucking bones, and he's got like a little place where he's eating next to it, and he's just laughing and laughing and laughing to by himself.
So pleased with himself. Like, I am a hoot.
Yeah.
Aren't I just a devil?
If you can't love your own company, who else company can you love? You know what I mean? He's just living his best life.
Oh, God, I love him.
Yeah, I would love hanging out with this dude. I ain't gonna lie. So yeah, Praetorius sends the ghoul home, decides to hang out and chill in the crypt by himself a little bit. So now, seeing booze and cigars, the monster approaches Praetorius, who is not frightened of him like everybody else. And so they hang out and they talk a bit. Praetorius tells him that he will make him a woman, a friend for the monster. And that's when he's like, I love dead, hate living.
Yes.
Which is a little like, okay.
Yeah. I noticed in this
scene, Praetorius's response is kind of like, me too, girl.
Right? Is like, yeah, you're pretty wise. I think he's like, you're wise than most people of your generation. Or something
you are
like
wise
that.
In your generation.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I noticed in this scene as well, so it kind of mirrored the scene with Henry and Praetorius in the laboratory when he was offering gin, being like, oh, it's my only weakness.
Oh,
and
yes,
then with
right.
the monster.
He says, cigars are my only weakness.
Yeah, so it's like, you're full of shit. Can't trust a
What
damn
a
thing you
fucking great
say.
character. It must have been so much fun to play this character.
I get that feeling, like when somebody hands you just a meaty, juicy bad guy to play, and you're like the sort of person who's like, oh yeah, I'm going to fuck this up. It has got to be the sort of like the most joyous occasion to just be like, okay, so you're like talking to the director, just being like, I can just kind of like go crazy with this. And the director's like, oh yeah. If you think you're not going crazy enough, go crazier. Cause like this character is just bananas from start to finish.
It's like we'll tell you if it's too much, we'll tell you when to reel it back, and we never will.
It's going back to last week's episode when we talked about Tim Curry and fucking Frankenfurter. Like, that is a once-in-a-lifetime role where you cannot possibly be acting big enough to satisfy the demands of the director.
Yeah.
So, Praetorius returns to Frankenstein's place to pitch him on the new project. He has all the parts he needs to make a woman. Frankenstein, he is trying real hard to resist that homosexual temptation, but the lure is too strong. Yeah. Because he's basically just like, no, I couldn't possibly. What about Elizabeth? Oh, you said you already have everything in place?
Well, okay.
He's like, wait,
Just a quickie, just a quick little resurrection.
Got a little question though. You said the brain is working, and we just need a heart. I'll see what I can do.
Yeah.
So I just have to show up then. That's all?
Yeah.
Yep. So, Frankenstein is just like putting up a front, though. He's like, he wants no part. So Praetorius reveals that he has the monster helping him and sends the monster to Elizabeth to capture her and use her for leverage against Frankenstein.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it turns out the monster has become something of a sexual predator while in Praetorius's company.
He's a corrupting force, and the monster's got this mild, like the mind of a 10-year-old, so it doesn't take much. He just like waves some cigars and gin in his face, and he's like, yes, good friend.
Exactly.
Which we know because when they created the dialogue for the monster, it was James Whale and I think Boris Karloff a little bit, and the studio psychiatrist. I would love to spend an entire episode unpacking the idea of a studio psychiatrist.
Oh, I read a note. It was like a very poorly written note about this, that it was like them and the psychiatrist used the sort of test results of 10-year-olds to sort of come up. And I'm like, wait a second. What test results? Like,
hey, look, don't ask questions. These are private matters. Sometimes you've got a studio psychiatrist. Sometimes you got kids on set. Who knows what happens?
I don't know.
Sometimes
I don't know if I like where this is
the studio psychiatrist is a kid. You know, you never really know.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. I just love the idea of like there was a studio doctor and a studio psychiatrist, and they're both pumping everybody full of drugs.
Right?
Yeah. So in the panic,
that's why they all died when they were 42.
Oh, well, that's the thing. Like, have you ever seen like what certain sort of like studio technicians wore when they went to work there? Like Jack Pierce, the makeup guy, always dressed like in like surgical garb and shit like that. Like sound engineers did the same thing when they were in the studio. They wear like lab coats and shit like they were scientists.
Really?
So everything about Hollywood just sounds insane up until like 1940. The guy, the cinematographer of this movie, they had to provide transportation to him to and from work every day just to make sure he didn't get so drunk that he would cause an accident or kill himself.
Yep.
Wow. So, yeah.
Because they were like, no, he's an asset. We need him. After this, we don't give a shit what happens. But until this movie's done...
I feel like that just kind of created the blueprint for the industry. I'm sure it's not much better today.
Oh, it did. It did. It was a disaster for everybody.
Going into the 40s and 50s, like things get really bad where it's like certain like actors, superstars who have been sort of like manufactured by the studio system they make a movie and then they do the press tour, and then as soon as they're sort of free until their next project, would just disappear into hotel rooms and just bathe in alcohol and just get as fucked up as possible. And then the next project...
It's all like that scene in Fear and Loathing where they get the hotel room and he wakes up with the dinosaur tail on him.
Right. But I suppose because it would have been this time where you're doing contracts, right? So you're like, oh, I'm guaranteed 6 movies. So I'm just in between. I don't have to try and find work.
Why?
The work is just going to come.
I will make $6,000 this year.
Yeah. Yeah, and of course, the studio sort of took care of you in as much as you were their property. So, like, as long as they didn't need you immediately, they just provided you with all the fucking booze and pills that you could handle without dying. And though a lot of people did fucking die because of it, but
they did have to do some things. They would do weird shit like. You would show up at like the opening of like a new grocery store in Los Angeles. Like weird shit like that.
Yeah.
But otherwise you didn't have it. Like you'd go and do like a support our troops night at the fucking canteen or whatever.
Yeah.
And then then you'd go, Douglas Fairbanks would go back home and have sex with his 13-year-old wife or something weird like that.
Oh God.
Everybody was given like a garbage bag full of cocaine.
Pretty much, yeah.
It's like your goodie bag at the end of the birthday party.
Fruit basket
of your 13-year-old wife.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, in this panic, Praetorius tells Frankenstein that it's all good as long as Frankenstein helps him finish the next project. So together, they put their skills together to fabricate a brain and activate a dead heart. But the heart isn't sufficient, So they sent Praetorius's ghoul out to find a younger, fresher one from the emergency hospital, but he instead just snatches a woman off the street.
Yeah. Yep, straight
Don't
up
worry,
murder.
Dwight Fry's got a plan for this one.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, it was like
he also has like a real
hospital.
hard curtain bang that I find kind of off-putting.
Yeah. So the new heart is exactly what they need, and while they work, they need to keep the monster sedated. So Praetorius gives him some more wine, but he puts a little something in it, which knocks him out.
Which, hey everybody, this is just a thing men used to do to their wives when they wanted to go out on a Friday night. No joke. I'm not even kidding.
The Praetorius also presents Henry with a sort of telephone device so that he can talk to Elizabeth for proof of life, which is just a bizarre little detail that I love because it's just weird mad science shit. But like what is happening?
It definitely has like a weird, like she's in a cave. Like it has a weird child adventure story quality to it. Like they're holding her hostage in a cave, talking to her on this giant fucking wooden box phone.
Yeah.
It's true, and it's like, well, let's follow her for a minute. You know what I mean? Like, what's her day all about?
Except she's boring as hell.
She's just constantly.
What's her day? Yeah, her day is fainting and screaming.
I was going to say, like, she's her day is mostly just pressing her hand to her forehead and being like, "Oh, Henry," and then just like falling on a couch.
Yeah, wearing outfits that wear her instead of the other way around.
Exactly.
This
is also where Franz Waxman's score starts doing lots of weird things at this point, where like they keep it, there's a lot of like big swells that start like kind of indicate the movie is starting to either come to a climax or wind down, and it will do this to the rest of the movie.
Oh,
like it just keeps kind of swelling and then ending. And you're like, oh, this must be the end. Nope. Yeah. There's still 15 minutes
right,
left.
because we're down to about 15 minutes of this movie, and like there is like kind of like a leitmotif that keeps running through that he's definitely trying to be like, see, exciting, things are getting more tense and more tight, right?
But like it's also at this point, because I was watching this in the background and Johnny was like behind me watching it. Sorry, I was watching it and Johnny was in the background, and at a certain point turned to me, he's like, the bride isn't in it yet. And that must have been the reaction of people when they went to see this movie. When you're at like the 1 hour
like,
mark.
I thought there was a woman in this movie?
Yeah. She's on all the posters.
Yeah. So now they set to work amid some crazy camera angles and like lighting and a mad science laboratory set. And this is where I just love shit, because it's like super tight shots of like Praetorius, but like really high contrast. Like his crazy ass eyebrows, and he's just looking very intense. And then they'll cut over to like Colin Clive, who's just like pressed up against a piece of machinery with his hair all fucked up and he looking all sweaty.
Yeah, it looks really cool. Like the way his hair sort of falls in his face, and he looks like they all look really intense. Like the contrast in these. I think this is what it's easy to forget that James Whale was so talented when you watch this, because like you're like, oh, this movie's kind of whimsical and a little silly. And then you get to this scene and it's like all this like lighting is going off left and right, and there's lightning and everything. And it's like, oh, right. It looks cool as shit.
Yeah, this was the AAA moment that he had been working toward the entire movie. Like he probably planned this part out first. So yeah, with the storm.
I mean, they then kind of ruin it with like big dumb giant kites for some reason.
Shut up! I loved that like idea that like, oh, we're just gonna fly.
I feel like that's kind of unreliable as far as capturing electricity.
Sure,
probably.
Yeah.
I still I think it's such a cool little detail because it's just
the camp
mad
of it
science,
is fun.
Mad science shit.
Yeah.
So yeah, with the storm rising, they marvel at their work so far. Another creature made from parts on the table, and then they send up a series of kites to catch the electrical charge. The sets we just talking about, amazing. Just I love a crazy ass black and white mad science set. Because like everything's like just like equipment with like weird like arcs of electricity and like showers of sparks going off constantly.
Yeah,
but I think if your job is you're a set decorator or you're like a prop master, it must have been so fucking fun to like do that work for movies like this. Where you just like all these little tiny details that you're getting to create, just little things that nobody else would notice, but they're like little things in the back. Must have been super fun.
I know.
And you don't have to like explain it either. It's just there, and we all just accept it. And
because you're like, it's mad science. What do you know about it? You can't tell me.
Exactly.
You mean to tell me you made a monster out of body parts? Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So just like the creation of the monster in the first movie, the kites catch the electrical charge. And they send the body on the slab up to the roof to receive the charge and kind of bring it to life. And then meanwhile, the monster regains consciousness and charges up to the roof, which panics Fritz or Hans or whatever his name is. That's Dwight Carl. And then he grabs Frankenstein's monster, grabs the ghoul and throws him off the roof because you just
sort of unceremoniously just chucks him over the edge.
Yeah, you blink, you miss it.
Yeah. So when the body is brought back down to the lab, they inspect her and she moves. And then they quickly get to removing all the science stuff and bandages, revealing a seriously glammed up bride who immediately gravitates towards Frankenstein.
Now, look, I mean, we know what is the defining feature of the bride is her hair.
Yeah.
And we're supposed to believe that afro is contained underneath these tightly wound bandages.
It's the electricity,
like they just take it off and it springs up like Sideshow Bob.
No, I fully believe that there is a good hour in between those scenes where Doctor Praetorius just got her down in his chair and he's just giving her that good glow
He's just
up.
teasing it out.
Yes, you know it. You know it.
Oh, no, because she's got the painted on like eyebrows.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect.
And
perfect
it's so
lipstick.
like she is. I love when she kind of lurches towards Frankenstein because he has this kind of like no, not me, man, not me. But she plays it so weird the way because she said that Elsa Lanchester said she designed this character, this performance after watching Swans.
I love it.
Yeah. She and Charles Lawton would go to Regent's Park and would feed the swans. And she was like, these creatures are nasty as fuck. Beautiful.
She would go, we would just say shitty things to the swans.
Just throw shade
that's
at
the
the
kind
swans.
of person she was.
You know
I could
what?
see her
Those
just
swans...
go to the park and being like, fuck you, swan.
Yeah. What do you know? You're not the
Swans?
bride of Frankenstein, are you?
Swans are so aggressive, though. If you've ever encountered them, swans and geese. There was a public park in, I grew up in Nova Scotia, so Halifax was a city there, and there were geese there. They would attack people on a regular basis, chase people across the park, like not even giving a fuck.
Yeah, I don't know what it is. I think where I live currently must be in like a major migratory path for Canadian geese because there is a point in the like when they're either going south or heading north, like they always shitloads of them, dozens and dozens of them park in my backyard.
Oh wow.
And if we go out there, they'll start coming at you slowly at first, but if you're not like up with the fucking door shut on your deck and stuff, like they will come for you.
Right?
So, yeah, it is.
Is it like the turkeys though, where you gotta hit them first? Because I don't have geese, I just have turkeys, and because I live in Boston, we just have turkeys for some reason, like just everywhere. They're just allowed to walk around like they live here.
The turkeys occupy the streets, and that's when you have to like sort of nudge up to them real close in the car, and that's when they drag their talons along the road and shit. Yeah. Fucking man, foul. They don't call them foul for nothing. They're just the fucking worst.
But I digress.
Yeah,
the whole point was she watched the swans, and she based it on, and you can see it too, because there is something very kind of bird-like in her
the way she
performance,
turns
the way
her
she's
head.
moving her head.
Yeah.
It's this like very sharp, angular movements, and it's like her eyes kind of get big all the time, and like she does this kind of like weird thing with her mouth. It's really bizarre and kind of off-putting, but in a way that, again, you're just captivated by her and by her performance, and the way she looks is so intense. It's really, really cool. You know what? I'm selling myself on this movie. I take it back. No hot takes.
It's a great movie.
Let's talk it out. We'll win you over. So, yeah, when the monster comes down to see her, he approaches her, and she screams, immediately rejecting him. And she rushes to Frankenstein's arms for safety.
Which, again, he's just kind of like, no.
Right. What he does is he kind of like, she reaches out and takes her, not touching her, but sort of guides her by like his hand to sort of take her again towards the monster.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so now, angry, the creature begins just trashing the place and moves toward this like magical lever that, if pulled, will just destroy the entire lab.
Doesn't
Which
every
I'm gonna
building
say
have that?
this seems like a design flaw.
This is like a real failure of engineering.
Just a little bit.
So yeah, Elizabeth, she runs in and she pulls Frankenstein out.
Boo.
And the monster insists, like, no, you go, live. Which, if I were him, I'd blow the whole fucking lot of them up.
Yeah,
Right.
I
But
read
then he
initially.
follows it up with "We belong dead."
Yeah, fuck
Yes,
yeah, what a line.
yes, that's such a good line. But initially, I believe Henry was supposed to go down with the castle, but the studio said that they wanted a happier ending.
That was like either a studio thing or a Hays Code thing. Because like
It's a Hays Code thing because it has to do with there was one of the requirements with the Hays Code was that if you were going to have these sort of morally questionable things, it had to have a moral lesson at the end. And so the lesson here is that, you know, you have to destroy this thing. It cannot live. And he has to learn his lesson in the end is that we can't do this. And so the closing of this movie is essentially, if you want to go back to the queer read, the closing is the only way for Henry to kind of quote unquote live is to reject this kind of monstrous queerness, because Praetorius also dies
Yes.
in this. He is one of the ones that has to die. That he specifically says that. And that the only way he can do that is by embracing heteronormativity, by sort of rushing back to Elizabeth's boring arms.
Yep.
And it's kind of like, well, all's well that ends straight. And that's the only way that you can sort of resolve this movie. And that's the case with a lot of movies that come out around this time is, I mean, literally in the Hays Code, you could have gay characters in your movies, but they had to die. Or they had to be shown to be living in a sort of immoral, undesirable lifestyle.
They were
that
always
was the only way you
villains.
could include them.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And even after the Hays Code, that's sort of how up until, 20 or so years ago. And so that is how this movie ends, is you have to destroy queerness and go back to the plan of marrying a woman, and that's the end of the story. And it's kind of like, meh,
Yeah.
boo.
It's like gay bad, straight
pull-
good.
Yeah.
Yep, he pulls the lever, blows the lab to smithereens. Roll credits.
Yeah.
And I do love that this is an old school, like old timey credits list where it's not like now where it just rolls and rolls and rolls. You just get the cast, and at the top it says a good cast is worth reading.
Worth repeating. Yeah, because they had the same title card at the beginning, and then they did it again at the end. But I love that they never credited the bride.
Yeah, yeah. Like
Because they
who
do
they-
the same thing in the original Frankenstein. You didn't know. In later versions, his name got added.
Yeah.
Oh,
But at
I
the
didn't
time,
realize
it was
that.
just a question mark.
Yeah,
I love
and,
that.
And even now, it just says Karloff.
Karloff, which is great, man. He's just eponymous.
Yeah.
Yeah, like Madonna.
Very that. Exactly the same thing, actually.
Yeah, it's Karloff, Cher, and Madonna.
That's it. That's the,
The three
trifecta.
pop princesses.
Yeah, fucking A, man. Bride of Frankenstein. What a movie, man. And that is
a great
that is
movie.
a tight, packed 75 minutes of a movie right there. Like it is.
I still think it. I don't know. I still think it doesn't like. It has a lot happening, but it sort of doesn't really come to much in the end. You're sort of like, well, I watched it, and then a bunch of stuff happened, and then it ended, and he went back to that terribly boring woman. So
Yeah.
okay.
It doesn't overstay. You know, I think if this had have been longer, it would have been feeling very draggy.
Yeah, like this was a very common runtime at the time for these movies at the time because like Dracula's like not much longer than this. The original Frankenstein.
No, it's shorter. Dracula's about 65 minutes or
This
70
is like
minutes.
Right.
70. I think Frankenstein's 70. The Wolfman's like 75. Mummy is like 75 minutes. Like this was very common. And so like I think if they were to sort of draw these movies out a little bit more, they would definitely slow down and be a little bit.
But even like, I think this one even has like it sort of doesn't feel like a cohesive narrative. It's like a bunch of shit happens and it's all strung together. It's like, what's happening in the days or like the lives of these characters? And you're like, oh, I guess this.
Yeah.
Okay. And it just so happens like the acting is so good that you're like, but I really like it. I'm with them because it's fun.
That's what I was going to say is it is just a series of like vignettes that are all tied together by some really, really memorable, great performances and a fucking awesome monster at the end. Like like the fact that she's in it for just a few minutes and is just like the marquee character is amazing. And
I could go either way. Like, I think, because my initial note was, you have this awesome character and this awesome looking monster and this great actor in the role, and you don't do much with it. But at the same time, now I'm kind of like, maybe that's the sort of secret to it, is like, it's just this big ending where you're like, here's this fucking weird ass character. If we dragged this out anymore, she wouldn't be that cool.
Yeah.
No, because it would just be her hissing and you know,
Right.
screaming more for however long she was on screen for. So we didn't need more than that to really like connect with who this character was, which admittedly wasn't very much.
Yeah, I have Una O'Connor for screaming and shrieking.
Yeah. And that's it. And that's why it's just like, I find it interesting when people try to use this narrative that this movie has a feminist slant on it, because I don't think this movie treats any of its women characters with much respect or depth at all.
No, and I think that's very common of gay men at the time. I mean, fucking even gay men now, but especially at the time, there is a sort of misogynistic bent to that worldview. And I don't think you see it too much in this, but it doesn't think much of the women in it. I mean, Una O'Connor is a screaming, shrieking shrew. You know, Elizabeth is this fainting idiot.
Yeah.
And the bride is like a literal monster who's like foreign in every sense of the word.
She was literally an object. She was created to be owned.
Yeah.
She was created to be possessed, you know, by a man. And then
It's like we do it because we can.
Yeah. And then because she rejects the man, then she must be destroyed because she's deemed worthless. You know, it's just like, wow.
Yeah, I don't get a feminist read of anything on this. I think if anything, it's a little misogynistic.
Yeah, I agree on that.
Definitely characteristic of the time, though. Like, this is not unusual for movies of this era whatsoever.
God,
No. I mean, as far as the universals go, it's not until like Creature from the Black Lagoon comes along that a woman has more of a role to play than just like.
And even then,
that's not.
Even in Creature, she's still like a fainting, swooning idiot.
And she's a painted baby. She's like out on the lagoon, and she's got just this like full beat on the entire time. And it's like, I'm pretty sure you didn't have waterproof mascara yet, so I don't know why you're doing all that.
Yeah, she's out doing aquatic research, but she's also wearing Jean-Paul Gaultier while doing it. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah. She has to be able to do it all, you know.
Yeah. But end of the day, what a movie, man. I love these universals so much.
This is easily my favorite era of horror to talk about. I love the 30s and 40s. I'd say 30s through 50s are my favorite.
Yeah.
It was a blank slate. Like nobody there in the silence there were horror movies. And like even some of the first movies ever made by like Thomas Edison was Frankenstein. So like I mean there's a legacy there, but like even by that standard, like this is the dawn of talking pictures, and like people are just Universal figured it out. Like Carl Laemmle Jr. just knew what to do like from the start, which is crazy. And the fact that he had to talk his dad into doing these things in the first place is nuts, because like this is what eventually kind of comes to define the Universal style at the time, until eventually they kind of fall out of fashion. But man, there's so much fun.
I think what I think is really interesting here about this particular era is that I think we tend to think of these directors as kind of like they're just journeyman people who would make, they directed movies just like people, Grips and everybody else. Like they all had a role and they all did it, and there were no auteurs, but there really were at the time. You have people like Todd Browning or like James Whale, who are like, these were visionary people who were very, very creative. And they really found a way to put their mark on these movies. There were tons of other people who were just journeyman directors who just did whatever they were told. And I think they get overlooked in a way that is really criminal. And I think that's if anything, that's why it's worth going back and looking at this, because you can say there's so much of James Whale's life that makes its way into this, whether it's his queerness or not. It's all going to be in there, and it makes it all so much more interesting.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And just the black and white, like the beauty of black and white. You're not playing with color, you're playing with contrast, you're playing with hues, you're playing with shadow, and it's such a fucking vibe. And I wish people were allowed to play with that more.
Nobody did it better than James Whale either.
Yeah.
like we go over it in our Old Dark House episode. Like there is a very sort of like pivotal moment that is just shadow play that is amazing. Like I've never seen.
I mean, we did it with we just did The Haunting a couple weeks ago.
Yep.
It's like you can see how Robert Wise is trying to do that. He's trying to replicate that same thing, and he didn't have to. I mean, he did contractually have to shoot that in black and white, but there was, color would have been probably the preference at the time, and he didn't do it that way, and it's a better movie for it.
Yeah,
I agree.
Yeah. So Tyler, thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you.
This has been great. This has been great.
Yeah.
This was tell everybody where they can find you. What are you up to? What are you doing? Plug your business.
Yeah. You can listen to my podcast that I co-host with my husband Johnny. That's Spooky. We talk about spooky stories, true crime, all kinds of things. We actually did an episode on James Whale a few years back as an icon of horror. And so you can follow us on Instagram at That Spooky Pod, or you can just find us on podcast apps.
All right, and Dave, this year movie closes out our Pride series for June.
Does.
So what are we doing? What are we doing next?
Well, Bring Me the Axe will be back in 2 weeks with one of my all-time favorite 80s horror movies, Return of the Living Dead.
Yeah. We were gonna do this last year, and we kicked it off into the into the future. We're finally getting around to it. It will answer the age-old question: do you want to party?
It's party time.
All right. So, we'll be back here in a week with 99 Cent Rental. We'll return when we look at Angel. And then we'll be back in 2 with Return of the Living Dead.